Thank you, everyone. We've noted some questions for each of the panelists. We have some specific questions for panels, but we wanted to start out with a more general question. For the opportunities that you talked about, could you let folks know, is it better to be really strong in one language or have decent skills in more than one language? And I'll leave it up to the panelists to decide who would like to tackle that first.
Well, I'm happy to talk about that for the State Department. I didn't get a chance to mention during my presentation that if you're interested in the role of a foreign service officer, even though languages are not a requirement, we'll take applications from people who do not have any foreign languages, because we believe if you have all the other skills we're looking for, we can train you in that. But if you have fluency in some foreign languages, you do receive a certain point advantage at one point of the hiring process. You can learn more about that on our website. And in addition, your candidacy, you're likely to be a more competitive candidate if you have fluency in a foreign language or more than one foreign language, and you can show that you've really operated in it, right? Because we're looking for people who can demonstrate that they have the ability to function in different cultures. What better way to show that than to say that you have been living and working in another place, operating completely in a different language and culture, maybe going to school there or working there or spending a large amount of time there and volunteering for an organization there. So that kind of experience can be really invaluable in making you a competitive candidate as a foreign service officer. And you heard Abby talking to you about the specific language requirements if you're interested in the Consular Fellows program. So that's kind of a long answer to a short question, sorry.
Yeah, and so, thanks, Ron. To add on to that, for the Consular Fellows program, you can apply with multiple languages. And if you have multiple, you're strongly encouraged to, because foreign service demand for foreign service consular work in different countries in different positions with language requirements as part of the program changes and fluctuates, as we know. So you're definitely encouraged to bring multiple.
So if anyone's interested to join the teaching force at the LI FLC, the requirement is actually the same across the board, across all languages. So if you're multilingual, you have to be at level 3, the ILR level 3, to be able to join the teaching force.
Do you want to take this one, Jeff, or?
Well, Caitlin, let Caitlin kind of handle the very broad overview of kind of how the federal government treats language proficiency beyond what Ron and Abigail have said about the State Department. But what I want to say is just some subjective feedback that I have from watching several years of applications get reviewed for the Boren Awards, and sort of how people who are deep specialists in a particular language fare in the competition versus how people who are approaching a new language will fare. For many of our languages, and this is particularly true of the most popular ones like Russian and Arabic and Mandarin and Portuguese, many of the people that are in that competition are people who have done significant prior investment in the study of the language, 2+ years, in many cases have done prior study abroad. But I do want to say that those people are not necessarily at a competitive advantage, because we are far more interested in their treatment of national security and in that career path that they map out. We do not have a minimum proficiency requirement for most languages. And so people who are coming to these languages fresh, especially what are classified as less commonly taught languages because they are difficult to find instruction in, will be very competitive, but they need to be aware that they are coming in with, sort of the built-in skepticism among the panelists that they may not be as serious about language study as some of these people that have had prior study. So I just want to put that out there. Now, in terms of people who have done prior study of a Boren language, almost always my advice to those applicants is to continue that investment in that language, because you are going to be much more valuable to these government agencies with a deeper proficiency in a specific, less commonly taught, less available language than you are by developing kind of a shallow proficiency in several. Many agencies of the federal government, including the State Department, will train you additionally if they need you to understand other languages. But to come in with something really marketable I think it's best to continue that investment. The notable exception that I would say are for people who are interested in regions or countries that are multilingual. So someone who has previously studied Russian and now wants to study Kazakh, that makes a lot of sense. Somebody who has studied Mandarin and now wants to study Cantonese, again, that makes sense. Somebody who's studying French and Wolof, or Portuguese and an indigenous Brazilian language. These are all good framing of the shift from one language to another. But someone who has previously been studying a lot of Mandarin and suddenly wants to begin Arabic, that's not going to be as competitive for most people. I don't want to say there are never exceptions to that, but that's generally true.
I'll definitely echo what Jeff said. I think generally, if you've already invested a lot of time and effort into studying a language, it's, it doesn't always make sense to jump to a new language just because you think having some lower level skills in that might be more marketable. It really depends on your situation. For me personally, when I was applying for the Boren, I had studied Spanish for quite a long time and had a pretty good level in that already, as well as I had been to Latin America a few times, but I'd never been to Brazil, and I didn't really have an opportunity for Portuguese instruction at my university. So that was something that made sense for me, was to get into a new regional language in an area where I already had a bit of experience. I think generally from a federal perspective, working with a lot of former Borens as far as their careers, it really depends on what kind of career you want to go into. If you really want to be, on the front lines of intelligence, you want to be working as a signals officer or in intelligence collections, for example, you really need to have a very high level in that language. You already need to have a lot of experience and deep cultural knowledge in that one specific language. And in that case, it would make a lot more sense for you to continue to focus on that language specifically and to keep bettering your skills and learning, different dialects possibly, or maybe slang terms that might be useful, those types of things. If you're really more interested in sort of a general, civil service career in a particular regional area, like you maybe want to focus on the Middle East in more of a policy capacity, then having the language skills helps, but it might be helpful to have experience with a few different languages in that region. So I think, really consider what your career goals are. Like Jeff mentioned, if an agency really needs you to speak a high level of a particular language and you're not there yet, they may provide you with additional training. What's really valuable to them in a lot of positions is the cultural experience and the regional knowledge that you bring, having been there, spent some time there, done a lot of studies in this language. They really value having that perspective. But if you really do want to work in translation or intelligence, really continue to focus on the language that you have the most expertise in currently.
Thank you all for answering that question. We now have a round of questions that are specific to each of the panels. So Jeff and Caitlin, what makes an applicant really stand out from the Boren perspective?
I can tackle this. I think I've already addressed sort of how one conveys that serious commitment to language study. I will add one other thing. For those of you who perhaps have a heritage knowledge of a language and would like to continue studying it, or who are already at an advanced level of study with a language, there's also no maximum proficiency level. So you can design a program that really continues to build on those skills by developing an academic vocabulary in your subject matter, or working on your academic writing, or working on your public speaking. The other two, I think, key pillars of Boren are showing that you have a deep analytical understanding of a major area of public policy related to US national security in some way. And that is very broad. You can do that from any perspective. You can do that, of course, from a diplomacy or defense or intelligence perspective, but you can also talk about it from, telecoms or public health or trade. Many, many different ways that you can frame it, but depth is far more important than breadth. What we don't want is what I often call the Wikipedia overview of US relations with the country. 800 words is not enough to show that you have a deep understanding, even if you pick good examples. Much better to dig way down on a particular issue. That issue should be closely related to the second essay, or I guess the third pillar if I'm using this number system, which deals with a career in the federal government. And that is really probably where most applications fall short. I would say that the best way to stand out from this pack is to show a researched and passionate desire to pursue careers in the federal government by showing that you understand what you can do now while you're still in school. You understand some of the opportunities that might exist for you to pay for graduate school or the entry-level opportunities that exist. You understand that there are different jobs across the interagency. These are all very valuable examples. What's disappointing to see is when you have an applicant who has everything on their resume and that passion for language study, but then what they say in their essay is, and then I want to be a foreign service officer, full stop. That's great. Like 85% of our applicants say that they want to be foreign service officers, and they will be competitive applicants for those positions. Many of them go on to do that. But what we want to see is that you understand what the job entails and that we've got some sense of why you're selecting it and the skills that you're going to develop to get there. Because everybody's going to assert that, you need to develop the idea.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm so
Please
sorry.
go ahead, Caitlin.
Jeff pretty much covered almost everything. One thing that I just wanted to add as like a final note was cohesion amongst your whole, like every portion of your application. That was the best advice that I got when I was writing my application, was like, how does what you're studying currently relate to the place you want to go, relate to what you want to do professionally, federal careers, making sure that you're telling a cohesive story about why it makes sense, you know, why everything fits together, how it's related to national security. You know, exactly like Jeff said, you know, don't just make this really great argument about why public health is important and you want to go to Senegal to study that intensively. And then I want to be a foreign service officer. Like, you really dig deep into what are some opportunities, you know, does it make sense for you to study this thing and then go into this career? How does everything fit together? That's just what I wanted to add.
And I don't want to take away from what Ron said earlier, that you can come from any background and go into the Foreign Service and you can work on different aspects of public policy. But if you don't explain how that's connected to that public policy issue, it's just an unanswered question. So if you are talking about telecoms in essay number 1 and the career path that you lay out has nothing to do with telecoms, people are going to wonder why. Or if you lay out, you know, you say you want to be a systems engineer in essay number 2, then why are you talking about, you know, language policy in essay number 1?
Thank you. Those are really good tips. And for Abigail and Ron, will you be placed in at a consulate in a country where the language studied is spoken?
Yes, so consular fellows are hired primarily for their language skills, which distinguishes the consular fellows program from career foreign service officer positions. And so they can expect to be placed in a country that has a high demand for consular services and that speaks their program language. So for Portuguese, you know, that's probably going to be Brazil, for example, and then a range of different countries for Spanish, Arabic, and mainland China for Chinese. So that's what they can expect as applicants.
And for foreign service officers and for other members of the Foreign Service, if they're fluent if they come to us fluent in a foreign language, we may very well want to send them to a country where they can make use of that language. But sometimes it doesn't work out that way. If you're fluent in Korean, for example, we might not have any positions open for you in South Korea when it's time for you to get your assignment. So we may ask you to go somewhere else, and we may train you for 6 months or 9 months in another foreign language. And that's part of the Foreign Service experience as well. So it's a great job for people who love languages, absolutely. And there's a chance to learn 3-4 languages, or maybe even more during a 25, 30-year career as a Foreign Service officer.
Thank you. And this next question is for Joemer. What qualifications are needed to teach at DLI, and are there any specializations specifically sought?
Okay, so a bachelor's degree at the minimum of foreign language education, foreign language teaching, education, but you will be at the senior instructor level. If you have a master's degree in related fields of linguistics, education, foreign language teaching, foreign language education, you can start at the assistant professor level. And of course, the corresponding sizes of your paychecks. Now, with regard to language requirement, the English proficiency, I'm assuming that the applicant is either a naturalized citizen or maybe a heritage speaker of the foreign language, one of the foreign languages that we teach at DLI, then the English proficiency should at least be 2, ILR level 2. And the proficiency level of the language that you seek to teach will have to be at level 3. Are there exceptions? Yes, there are exceptions. Sometimes if you're at level 2 plus DLI, if there's really no one else to hire, DLI will hire you on condition that you will up that level to a 3 during the course of your contract. So, and let me just add that you start at DLI on what we call not to exceed, which is a contract for a minimum of 3 months to 6, sometimes 1 year. And once you are hired, you may also be rehired, or your not to exceed contract date may be extended depending on the language requirement.
Thank you. For all of the panelists, we have a question. Is there an upper age limit for these career opportunities? And do you have any advice for older applicants who might be interested in these opportunities?
I'll kick that off for the State Department. If you're interested in being a foreign service officer or one of those foreign service specialist jobs I mentioned, like medicine or engineering or IT, we do have an age cutoff. You have to be you need to be at least 20 years old to apply, and you cannot be any older than 59 to apply, and you need to be no older than 60 to actually come and work for us. We also have a mandatory retirement for foreign service officers at 65. So if you started any later than that, you wouldn't really have time for much of a career. I'll let Abby in a moment talk to you about age requirements or the lack thereof in the Consular Fellows program. But I will say for foreign service officers, we get applications and we hire people all the time who are on a second, third career. We frequently hire retired veterans, retired military. We bring in people who have had long, successful careers in other fields, in government or elsewhere, who come to work for us in their 50s. That's not unusual at all. And in fact, kind of the average age for a new foreign service officer is around the mid 30s or so. We very much welcome applications from people who are, shall we say, far removed from their college days. Your experience, your skills you've gained through your career, through your experiences may be very useful to us and may make you a very formidable candidate. And Abby, go ahead and let everybody know about the Consular Fellows program.
Yeah, so there have been many Consular Fellows who have been retirement age, and there's no upper age limit to apply. You do have to be 20 to apply, just like other foreign service programs. You do have to pass a medical exam just to make sure that you are eligible to work and live overseas. And yeah, no upper age limit. Many successful Consular Fellows have served past retirement.
Speaking specifically for the Bourne Awards, because we do have a matriculation in degree requirement to receive the award, that is probably what drives the average age of our applicants and recipients, but there is no upper bound. You do have to be at least 18 in order to receive the award, but there is no upper age limit. In fact, in many ways, what you might consider to be a non-traditional student, someone who's a bit older when they're in a degree program, is going to have a lot of advantages that they can showcase in their application by showing that they have a more developed understanding of where they can go career-wise. They will probably be eligible for mid-level positions that people coming straight out of undergrad would not. Some of them may be veterans, and so we'll have that unique perspective on work with the federal government and that unique access. And of course, there will be people who have done analogous work that they would like to continue post-degree. So for that second essay where people talk about their career plans, it can really stand out. certainly people should be aware of age limits that exist at prospective employers. I do want to clarify something because Caitlin pointed it out in my earlier presentation. I did not want to say, don't say you want to be a foreign service officer on our application. I just wanted to let you know that almost a strong majority of our applicants do. So I want to make sure that if you say that that's what you want to do, that you research it well and that you really show that you understand the process so that you stand out from the large group of people who say that they want to be a foreign service officer.
On the service side of things too, we also have tons and tons of people who do report service as foreign service officers, and we love to see that. So it is absolutely a career option. We just want to see how it makes sense for what you want to study.
And Felicia, I just wanted to add something about qualifications, because a lot of new hires at the LI are actually international graduate students. So international graduate students who majored in translation, interpretation, especially out here in Middlebury Institute of International Studies, they apply for a job at the LI and get hired, and then it turns into a work visa, and then, you know, an immigrant visa and all of that. So it has some perks if you apply. If there are any international students out there, I would encourage you to check out usajobs.gov, and who knows, maybe if you have one of the really critical languages that we teach at the LI Washington, you might get hired. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joemer. Thank you, everyone. We have a clarification question for Boren. Is the application process different for the self-identified programs compared to the regional flagship initiatives?
Only slightly, and it is only slightly different for the undergraduates and the graduate students, which I could unpack if you'd like me to. But the main difference is that when you indicate that you want to go to a certain country and to study a certain language, if that country language pair matches our regional flagship language initiatives, it will also ask, are you applying for that? And if that's the case, then certain information will get auto-filled on your application, and you can focus on your essays and the rest of the content of the application. Whereas if you are self-identifying a program, you will need to go into greater detail about what the structure of the program is, number of classroom hours, extracurricular, the general structure of it. And if there are multiple programs in sequence, you'll have to do that for each of them. But essentially, the selection criteria are the same for both flagship language initiative applicants and non-flagship language initiative applicants.
Thank you. For programs that require an OPI, do they have to be from the current year, or do students need to retake the oral proficiency interview test to be considered for these opportunities?
Just speaking for Boren, we only have 2 languages, period, only one of which is preferred, that have a language proficiency requirement. French requires at least intermediate and can be done through our African Flagship Languages Initiative. Spanish, in the very rare 2 to 3 per year cases that we do approve it, requires at least advanced proficiency and should be tied to a program that further advances that proficiency. We fund all of the OPIs, and we will do OPIs not just for people who are applying for Spanish and French, but also for people who have claimed some level of language proficiency and are going overseas, because that's one of the nice little freebies you get out of Boren, is a pre and post program oral proficiency interview that you can then use those terms when you are applying to positions with the State Department or with DLI or many of the other places that ask these questions.
Thank you. We also have a question. In addition to language, this is for all the panelists, excuse me. In addition to language skills, what other kinds of skills are especially sought after for government employment?
All right. We actually collect a lot of information from hiring managers as far as what they're looking for from candidates, what kind of things they're not seeing. Really, some of the biggest things that we get are a lot of the things that you think of as soft skills. I'm talking effective communication, oral and written communication, public speaking skills. Data analysis has been a really big one that people are really looking for lately. So if you have any kind of quantitative skills, working with Excel, those types of things, teamwork, cultural adaptability, These are all things that you get from learning a language and from studying abroad that are constantly, people are always telling us like, these are the skills that I need. I'll train someone to do this job, but I need someone who already has these kinds of foundational things. Those are really some of the most popular things. Also in government, I think the keynote speaker did a really good job of addressing this. There are a lot of business type of things that you really wouldn't think of, government as needing, things like contracting. If anyone has any project management experience, those things are really sought after in a lot of different, program management offices. They need all sorts of people doing the financial side of things, people who know how to organize projects and timelines. Also a lot of administrative skills. That's how a lot of people get their foot in the door in a government office they're interested in. That's what I did actually, was I started off in a very administrative role and then moved into more program management. Those are some really common things that we see a lot from hiring officials.
Everything that Caitlin said, plus if you choose to come to DLI, patience and thick skin.
Yeah, Caitlin, you really hit the nail on the head. And in fact, just to show how much so, if you look at my screen right now, this is kind of our score sheet for the Foreign Service. This is what we are hiring for Foreign Service Officer. And it's all the things that Caitlin was just talking about, like cultural adaptability and communication skills and planning and organizing, because logistics are a big part of diplomacy as well. So this is really what we're looking for in a Foreign Service Officer. And with one exception, this is also what we're looking for in a Consular Fellow and for our Foreign Service Specialists as well. You'll find that on our website, easily accessible at careers.state.gov.
Thank you, Ron. Abigail just posted that in our chat too. So if you missed the website, that is in the chat. I know we only have, oh, sorry. We only have a few minutes left, but we have a nice reflective question to close out the panel. For all of the panelists, what international experiences in your career development were especially influential to you, if you'd be willing to share?
Oh, let me start this off because I started quite early. I was 16 years old when I became an American Field Service Scholar. I was an AFS student from the Philippines to the US, actually. So that started my interest started my global, looking at things from a global perspective, looking at things that not just concentrated on the country where I came from, but that also lit the pilot light in my interest in reaching out to international community. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the American Field Service Scholarship Program, but it's a great program, and I owe my beginnings of international relations and all of that from AFS. Thank you.
I think I had kind of an unusual experience when I was very young, actually, for family reasons, some of my parents' employment. I actually had the opportunity to live in Germany for a year when I was 5 years old. And that was a very interesting experience. I actually learned German really well as a kid, and then of course forgot it all because I didn't practice when I came back to the US. But I feel like that really sort of exposed me to, another culture at a very young age, even just for a short amount of time, and then studying a language as often as I could after that. I studied Spanish for a very long time. I had the opportunity to travel abroad a couple of times in college for some study abroad programs. Really going abroad for an extended period of time on my boren. I was actually in Brazil for 9 months, 2 full semesters. And I feel like that was really the most transformative experience because I really got past a lot of the life type of things that you have to do when you're setting up in a new country, like getting your visa, getting set up. I was living with the host family at the time, which was a totally different experience, and we became very close. Just living somewhere for a very extended period of time that was totally different from anything that I was used to and totally outside of my comfort zone, learning a language in a very short amount of time. All of that. I was fortunate to have that experience as a kid and then again in college. And that really solidified my interest in working for the federal government, continuing to learn languages, really being like a lifelong language learner. And I'm hoping to get back abroad as soon as, I'm able to, as soon as we're all able to travel abroad again in the future. But I would definitely encourage anybody, whenever you have that opportunity to go over abroad, to go overseas, to have a new experience, especially for an extended amount of time, definitely do it. Take advantage of that opportunity.
You know, I'm a really unusual case for a would-be diplomat when I look back at before I joined the Foreign Service. I grew up in Chicago, in the Chicago area, in a family where we just didn't travel. It wasn't part of our family culture. I think we also, quite frankly, didn't have the resources for it. And you know, in all the years growing up, I think we only left the Midwest 2 or 3 times, like for a road trip to Washington D.C. and not much at all. And I didn't get on an airplane until I was 15. I didn't have a U.S. passport until I was in my 20s, which is hard to believe now when I look at what I've been doing for the last 21 years or so. But I was always very hyper aware of the world and knew that I wanted to be out in it and to be a part of it and not just to be a tourist. I had friends, and I remember in high school who would go off, who obviously were able to go off with their families on like cruises. And they tell me about how they spent a day here and a day there and a day there. And I think that sounds terrible. The last thing I'd want to do is go to a place. It sounds so stressful to spend 6 hours in a place. I want to spend years in a place. I really want to get to know a place. And you know, I want to get a car and drive around it and find my way around. And I want to make friends, maybe a few enemies. I want to go to weddings. I want to learn the music, the dancing. I want to work in those places and really just become a part of another place as opposed to just seeing it. But I didn't get the chance to do that until I was a Foreign Service officer. I will say that in my 20s, my brother took me on my first international trip to the Middle East. And it was remarkable. And I felt so alive during that. It was just a 2-week trip, but I felt so alive that I barely slept because I didn't want to miss any of it. I would wander around like the neighborhood where we were staying just so I could see and experience as much as possible. You know, so I actually don't, I share this story often with when I'm talking to groups of people who probably never pictured themselves as Foreign Service officers. You know, a big part of our recruiting right now, if you've been hearing the President, the Secretary of State, what they're saying about the national security imperative of recruiting a diverse Foreign Service. A big part of my job is to talk to people who, unlike probably a lot of you, people who have never thought of doing something like the Foreign Service, but have the skills that we're looking for. And I think the story I'm able to tell is actually fairly meaningful to them because they can see that even somebody who hasn't had that opportunity before might still have the opportunity to join us. Oh, thanks.
Jeff, Abby, do you? Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Sure. My dad was a foreign area officer, which is like in the army. So basically a diplomat for them. And I got to live in Morocco as a kid and picked up some French there. But that's not what I wanted to tell you about. It was just that experience that inspired me to pursue the career in the Foreign Service in the first place. And I knew that I needed to develop a proficiency in a certain type of language in order to get that score boost and get in. So I went after Arabic. Studied it for 3 years undergrad, did an internship between my undergrad and grad school, and then studied it in grad school. But it wasn't until my boron between my first and second year of grad school that I was actually able to use the language in the country. And of course, I hit the ground and had to deal with a dialect for the first time and just felt absolutely adrift. Didn't think that all of this hard work that I'd put into the language had paid off. But it did get me that score boost, and it did get me an immediate fill position. So to the earlier question about, am I going to use my language? Sometimes the answer is yes. And there was a position in Damascus, Syria doing visas. And honestly, it was the best tour that I had. I'm so lucky to have been able to be there before it, fell apart. But just a wonderful, exciting place. And it was during a visit by one of my friends who was like super into Indiana Jones and all that stuff. So we all piled into my car after I picked him up at her and her friends at the airport in Damascus. And I just drove him straight down to Jordan so we could go see Petra and go see a bunch of other things on the way down. And it was while I was leaving this town called Karak, where there's a Crusader castle up on this bluff overlooking the Jordan Valley, that I was asking directions to this guy kind of across her in the car. And I'm just speaking Arabic to this guy. He's telling me back something like this. And as we're pulling out of there, she's like, nobody is going to have the experience that they're having with you because like you know where the roads are, even though there aren't signs. You know how to ask a shepherd on the side of the road directions. Like, and that was the first time, I don't know, 7 or 8 years after I'd started studying Arabic that I was like, wow, I speak this language.
That's great.
Okay, so-
Abby, do you want to share anything?
Yeah, so kind of like Ron, my family wasn't huge into traveling growing up, but an experience that kind of propelled me, my interest in learning foreign languages and cultures was I was in a Spanish immersion program as a child, and my family actually hosted people from different countries, from Ghana and Kazakhstan at home. So there were times when we would try to teach each other our languages, and you know, Kazakhstan, a country that I'd never heard of before. I was starting to learn some Kazakh and Russian as a child, and that just really kind of sparked my interest in learning more about other countries. And I think that's kind of what in the beginning caught my interest. So yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing that. And I'd like to reiterate again our thanks to all of our panelists for taking the time out this afternoon to speak with us. I would like to thank all of our participants for your great questions and conversation. And if we didn't get to some of your questions, we will be following up and posting resources and information on the Lichtel Career website, which is where all of our organizations are also listed, especially in the exhibitor tab. So if you can't find the contact information for someone, please let us know. We are happy to make that connection. I also have to correct an omission that in addition to Ali Sundin, we had Sarah Lake helping us on this panel, and I wanted to give credit to Sarah for all of her work and help. So again, thank you so much everyone for spending time with us this afternoon. Please check out the resources on the website, and we hope that everyone's looking forward to a really nice rest of your summer.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Felicia.
Thank you.
Thank you.